My name is Lila Carver, and I'm 29 years old.
I don't really know how to explain who I am without starting with my grandmother. She wasn't just family, in the way people toss that word around like it's a throw pillow. She was the person who stepped into the crater when my parents' car wrapped around a guardrail on a rainy night and never came home. I was 8. I remember the police officer's hat more than his face, how the brim dripped on the porch light as he waited for someone to answer the door. My grandmother opened it in her slippers and floral housecoat and, in a single inhale, became everything. Mom, dad, teacher, bedtime storyteller, human shield. She never married again, never complained, just folded me into her life like I'd always been there. So when I say my grandmother was everything to me, I mean it literally. She was my whole origin story. 6 months ago, they found the cancer. Pancreatic. Stage 4. The kind of diagnosis that doesn't bother with false hope. The doctor said maybe 3 months if we were lucky. She made it 6 because of course she did. Tough as hell until the very last inch of the road. The day we got the news, the fluorescent lights in the exam room hummed louder than the doctor's voice. My grandmother nodded like he was explaining a delayed flight, not her own death. "Well," she said, smoothing the front of her cardigan, "nobody gets out alive anyway." I choked out, "Gran," but she just squeezed my hand. On the drive back to her house, she talked about practical things, her will, passwords, who should get her slow cooker, while I stared straight ahead and tried not to crash the car from the way my vision kept blurring. That night, when I got home to the apartment I shared with my boyfriend, I already knew what I was going to do. "I'm moving back in with Gran," I said the moment I walked through the door. Landon Pierce, my boyfriend of 2 years, paused the game on his console. We'd been living together in my apartment for about a year. He had that messy hair, boyish charm thing that made strangers smile at him. "What? Like, for how long?" "She needs full-time care," I said. "Chemo, pain management, hospice eventually. I'm taking leave from work. I'll move into my old room." "You're just leaving?" His eyebrows shot up. "Lila, what about us? What about our life?" "She's dying," I said. "I need to take care of her." He stared at me for a long moment, jaw working. "Okay, but she's lived her life already. You have to think about your future, our future." That should have been a red flag the size of a billboard. Instead, I filed it under Landon being dramatic and told myself he was just scared. "It's temporary," I said, "a few months at most." He turned away, picked up the controller, then set it back down. "I'll visit," he said finally, "on weekends or whatever." He visited twice, maybe 3 times, always with an excuse locked and loaded. "Work's crazy. The guys are doing this thing. I already said yes. I'm coming down with something. You don't want me around her like this." I didn't push. I had bigger things to worry about. Appointment schedules, medication charts, coaxing my grandmother into eating when food tasted like metal and sand. The house I'd grown up in shrank around her illness. The living room became a maze of pill bottles, oxygen tubing, and blankets. Hospice pamphlets were stacked neatly on the coffee table like they were just another catalog. Nights blurred together, me sleeping in my childhood bedroom, half awake at every creak, listening for her breathing. Some mornings I'd find her in her armchair by the window, gazing out at the maple tree like she was memorizing it. "This is your home," she'd say whenever I fussed over her. "You should be out with your young man, not here with an old bird." "I am home," I'd say, "and Landon's fine." I said it so often I started to hope it was true. About 3 weeks before she died, I had to run to the pharmacy to refill her pain meds. It was one of those windy afternoons where fallen leaves skitter along the street like they're running from something. My Aunt Michelle had stopped by to sit with Gran while I was gone. We'd fallen into a rhythm, my aunt, my uncle, a couple cousins, taking shifts so nobody burned out completely. "I'll only be 30 minutes, I told them, grabbing my keys. Gran was propped up against pillows, skin pale as notebook paper. "I'll keep her company," Aunt Michelle said, kissing her sister's forehead. "Go." The pharmacy line was longer than it should have been at 3 in the afternoon. I kept checking my phone, anxious, imagining every worst-case scenario. When I got back, my aunt's sedan was still in the driveway, but she was outside, standing on the front walk, face flushed and tight with an emotion I couldn't read. "You okay?" I asked, the plastic pharmacy bag rustling in my hand. She looked at me like she was trying to decide whether to say something or swallow it. "Yeah," she said finally. "I should head out. Call me tonight, okay?" Before I could ask anything else, she got into her car and drove away faster than usual. The taillights disappeared at the end of the street. Weird, I thought, but everyone was stretched thin, strung out on grief and bad sleep. I chalked it up to that and went inside. Gran was dozing, a slight sheen of tears on her cheeks. When she saw me, she reached for my hand like she always did. "Everything okay?" I asked. She nodded, too quickly. "You got the medicine?" I let it go. I wish I hadn't. There are a dozen tiny moments like that I'd like to rewind and interrogate. 2 weeks later, my grandmother died at home in her bed. I was holding her hand. Aunt Michelle was there. Uncle Dave. 2 cousins. The hospice nurse. The house went so quiet when her breathing stopped that even the refrigerator hum sounded disrespectful. Landon wasn't there. "I can't handle seeing death," he'd texted. "It's too much for me. I'm sorry." I couldn't muster the energy to respond. I put my phone face down and climbed into the bed beside my grandmother's body, tucked my forehead into her shoulder like I was 8 years old again, and sobbed until my ribs hurt. Shaking hands, nodding. "Thank you for coming." Smelling too many floral perfumes mingled with incense and lilies. The pastor said kind things. People cried and hugged me. I felt distant, like I was watching it from the ceiling. After the service, we went back to Gran's house for the reception. Casseroles, cold cuts, people telling stories about how she'd delivered their babies, patched their roofs, loaned them money, baked them pies. I was in the kitchen putting out another tray of something when Aunt Michelle found me. "Lila," she said quietly, "can we talk?" "Sure." I wiped my hands on a dish towel, expecting some logistical question about paperwork or the will, but her voice was shaking. "I need to tell you something," she said, "about Landon, about the day you went to the pharmacy." My stomach dropped so fast I had to grab the countertop to steady myself. "What about him?" I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. She glanced toward the doorway, toward the sound of people laughing softly in the living room, and then back at me, eyes wet and furious. "I heard what he said to your grandmother when you weren't here," she whispered. "And after today, after the way he's been, I can't keep it to myself anymore." The room tilted. "What did he say?" I asked. She took a breath that sounded like it scraped her throat raw. "He told her you were wasting your life on her," Aunt Michelle said, "that she should just let go and stop being a burden." Everything in me went still. The words hung between us, heavier than the casserole dishes and sympathy cards, and everything else crowding that little kitchen. "What?" I whispered. "I heard it clear as day," Aunt Michelle said. I stepped into the hallway to give them privacy, but I paused. The door was mostly closed. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but when I heard his tone, her jaw clenched like she was trying not to grind her teeth into dust. "He told your grandmother that you were wasting your life taking care of her, that she was being selfish by holding on, that she should just let go and stop being a burden because you had a future to build and she was getting in the way." The refrigerator hummed. Someone in the living room laughed at a memory. A fork clinked on a plate. Life went on in the next room while my world froze. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My throat closed. I swallowed and tried again. "Gran, what did she do?" "She cried," Aunt Michelle said. Her voice broke on the word. "She didn't have the strength to say much. He just kept talking, saying he was only thinking about you, about how unfair it was that your whole life was on pause, like she hadn't already given up everything once to raise you." A wave of nausea rolled through me, so violently I had to press my palm flat to the counter to stay upright. "And then?" I asked. "After he left?" "I went back in. She grabbed my hand, made me promise not to tell you while she was still here." Michelle's eyes filled with tears. "She said she didn't want to add stress to your plate, that she didn't want you torn between her and him. She knew you'd be devastated." I saw it. My grandmother's thin fingers curled around my aunt's hand, her voice a frail whisper, asking someone else to carry one more burden so I wouldn't break under it. "So you waited," I said, my voice sounding far away, like it belonged to someone else. "I waited," she whispered. "But after she passed, I told the family this morning, before the service. Your uncle, your cousins, we all agreed. Landon is not welcome here, not at the funeral, not in this house, nowhere." "He didn't come anyway," I said. "He texted that he couldn't handle death, that it was too much for him." Aunt Michelle's mouth twisted. "I called him yesterday," she said. "Told him if he showed up, we'd throw him out. Maybe he decided preserving his pride was more important than supporting you." Something splintered in my chest. All the moments I'd downplayed, explained away, filed under stress, and "he's just scared." They rearranged themselves into a clear, ugly picture. The complaints when I first moved out. The way he'd sighed when I said I couldn't make a date because Gran had a rough day. The lazy, half-hearted visits. The text about not handling death. And behind it all this. He told her she was a burden, I said softly, the word tasting like blood. He told the woman who gave up her entire life to raise me that she was wasting mine. Aunt Michelle reached for me, but I stepped back. I'm okay, I lied. I'm fine. I wasn't fine. I felt hollowed out, like someone had scooped my insides with a dull spoon and left my skin standing there, nodding politely at grief. I'm so sorry, baby, she said. I should have... You honored her wishes, I said. It came out sharper than I meant. Her face fell, so I forced my voice gentler. I'm glad I knew it today. I needed to know who he really was. The living room noise swelled as someone told a story about Gran's stubbornness, laughter breaking like foam over rocks. The world continued, oblivious to the fact that my relationship had just died alongside the woman we were all here to mourn. An hour later, the shouting started. It cut through the murmur of conversation like a siren. Every voice in the living room stilled. I turned toward the front hall just in time to see my Uncle Dave standing in the doorway, shoulders squared, blocking the entrance. On the other side of him, framed in the open door like a bad omen, was Landon. He wore a black suit that fit a little too well, tie perfectly knotted, hair styled like he was on his way to an awards show. His expression was a carefully arranged mix of solemn and wounded. I'm here for my girlfriend, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Her grandmother just died. She needs support. Uncle Dave's voice was low but firm. You need to leave. My heart started pounding in my ears. People turned, plates suspended halfway to their mouths, conversations dropping off mid-sentence. My grandmother's church friends, the neighbors who'd watched me grow up, cousins I hadn't seen in years, all of them turned toward the commotion. Landon's gaze flicked over my uncle's shoulder and landed on me. His eyes softened, like he could will a memory of tenderness between us to life and project it onto the scene. Lila, he called, stretching my name out like a plea. Tell them I'm allowed to be here. The room seemed to contract, everyone's attention funneling toward me. I felt suddenly aware of my black dress clinging to my skin, the dampness at my collar where someone's tears had soaked into the fabric. Aunt Michelle moved to my side, her hand hovering near my elbow without quite touching me. My lungs burned. I realized I'd stopped breathing. Leave, I said. My voice didn't sound like a shout, but the silence around it made it ring louder than anything else. Landon blinked. What? You heard me. My fingers curled into fists at my sides. Get out. He laughed, this incredulous, disbelieving sound that turned my stomach. Are you serious right now? Your family is being insane, and you're just going to... What? Throw me away at your grandmother's funeral? You told my dying grandmother to hurry up and die, I said. The words were a knife. I watched them land. The crowd seemed to lean forward as one organism. Someone sucked in a breath. One of the church ladies muttered, Lord have mercy, under hers. Landon's face went white, then blotchy red. That's completely out of context, he said quickly. Who told you that, Michelle? She's twisting things. Does it matter who told me? My voice shook, but it didn't quiet. While I was out getting Gran's medication, you told her I was wasting my life on her, that she was being selfish by holding on, that she needed to let go so I could get back to my future. I was trying to help, he said, desperation creeping in around the edges of his words. She was suffering, Lila. I was trying to give her peace. Maybe I worded it badly, but... You told her she was a burden, I said. I couldn't stop now. The words were lava. She cried. She was too weak to defend herself, and you stood there and told her to hurry up and get out of the way. I never said burden, he snapped. That's your aunt putting words in my mouth. I was concerned about you, about your mental health. You were burning yourself out, and nobody else would say it. Uncle Dave shifted, blocking him more fully as Landon tried to step inside. Back up, my uncle said. You're not welcome here. Landon looked past him to me, panic fully visible now. Baby, come on, you know me. You know I would never hurt you. I almost laughed. It caught in my chest instead. You hurt me the second you decided my comfort mattered more than her dignity, I said. You made her think she was ruining my life with every breath she took. Do you have any idea what that did to her? To me, knowing that's what you put in her head while I wasn't there to defend her? People were staring at him with open disgust now. My grandmother's best friend shook her head slowly, lips pressed tight. One of my cousins whispered something that sounded like unbelievable under his breath. "This is insane," Landon said, his voice pitching higher. "You're all twisting this. I came here to support my girlfriend, and you're attacking me in front of a room full of strangers." "This is a private residence," Uncle Dave said, each word clipped. "You were told not to come. You're being asked to leave, now." Landon looked around, finally registering the wall of faces turned against him. His Adam's apple bobbed. "You're making a mistake, Lila," he said, switching tactics. His voice dropped, intimate, like we were alone. "You're grieving. You're not thinking clearly. You're going to regret this when all of this is over and you realize you threw away the one person who was honest with you." Honest. The word nearly broke something in me. "I'd rather be alone than with someone who looked at the woman who saved my life and saw an inconvenience," I said. "Get out." For a heartbeat, I thought he might push it. Step past my uncle. Make a bigger scene. Then Uncle Dave took one deliberate step forward, phone in hand, thumb hovering over the screen. "Leave," he repeated, "or we call the police and have you removed." Something in Landon deflated. He looked at me one last time, fury and something like fear warring in his eyes. "This isn't over," he muttered. Then he turned on his heel and walked back down the front path, his dress shoes loud on the porch wood. The door closed behind him with a soft click that felt much louder. The room stayed silent for a moment. Then my grandmother's best friend shuffled over and wrapped me in a hug that smelled like powder and lavender. "She would have been proud of you," she murmured into my hair. "Proud you chose yourself. Proud you chose her." I nodded against her shoulder. I wasn't okay. Every part of me felt cracked and raw and wrong. But underneath the grief and anger and shock, there was a thin, steady line of something else. Relief. 3 days later, the noise started. My phone became a war zone overnight. Texts, missed calls, voicemails, Landon's name pounding against my lock screen like a fist on a door. Some messages were apologetic. "I'm so sorry, Lila. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. Please let me explain. I was just worried about you." Some were furious. "You humiliated me in front of your entire family. Do you have any idea how that felt, after everything I've done for you?" And some were unhinged. "You can't just throw me out of your life like trash. I still have stuff at the apartment. You better not touch my things. I know my rights." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I stayed at my grandmother's house, walking from room to room like the walls might speak and tell me what to do next. Grief pressed down on me from above. Landon's words pulsed underneath like an infection. It took me longer than I want to admit to realize this wasn't going to burn out on its own. He wasn't going to take his humiliation and disappear. He was just getting started. The messages didn't slow down. They multiplied, splitting into versions of Landon I'd never seen before, each one more desperate than the last. One minute he'd be remorseful. "Please, Lila, I made a mistake. You're grieving, and everything's heightened. Let me come over. Let me fix this." Then, minutes later, "You're being manipulated. Your aunt poisoned you against me. You know what your family is like." 10 minutes after that, "Pick up the phone or I swear I'm driving over there right now." I turned my phone off. Then I turned it back on. Then I turned it off again. Grief makes you slow, but harassment makes you sharp. Every vibration made my whole body tense. Aunt Michelle noticed. "You don't have to answer him," she said as she sorted through a box of old Christmas ornaments at the dining table. "You owe that man nothing." I know, but part of me still felt guilty, conditioned, like if I didn't respond, something bad might happen. It already had. 2 days later, there was a knock at the door. I opened it, expecting a neighbor with a casserole or another relative dropping off something from the funeral. Instead, Chloe, Landon's ex-girlfriend, was standing on my grandmother's porch. I had never once spoken to her. I'd only seen her once in an old photo Landon kept on his phone for too long after our relationship began. They'd dated before me, had this on and off thing that he always described as toxic and over. She had long auburn hair, sharp cheekbones, and the kind of confidence that radiated effortlessly. Seeing her there was like watching a ghost decide it wanted a second chance at life. "We need to talk," she said. I actually laughed, a short, stunned sound. "No, we don't." She rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. "He's devastated, Lila. Absolutely wrecked. He hasn't eaten. He hasn't slept. He keeps replaying everything. I'm only here because he literally can't get out of bed." "Funny," I said. "He had the energy to text me 37 times in the last 24 hours. She blinked, caught off guard. He feels awful. You know he loved your grandmother too. No, I said, he didn't. Chloe shifted her weight and dropped her voice like we were co-conspirators. It was one mistake, she said. One moment of panic. You're throwing away 2 years together because he said something badly under stress? Badly? My voice cracked, incredulous. He told my dying grandmother to stop being a burden. He made her cry. Chloe's expression softened, but not with empathy, with strategy. Look, he was hurting. You moved out. You stopped being present in the relationship. You basically abandoned him. The words hit like a slap. I stepped forward. I was taking care of a terminally ill woman who raised me from childhood. That's what abandoning him looks like to you? Okay, don't twist my words, she said quickly. I'm just saying, he felt neglected. Anyone would crack under that pressure. My hands were shaking, not with fear, with something hotter. Leave, I said, right now. You're being dramatic, she said with a sigh. I didn't answer. I just closed the door on her mid-sentence. Through the window, I watched her stand there for a long, stunned moment before stomping off to her car. She didn't leave until she yelled something unintelligible into the air like she needed the world to know she'd done her part. That night, I finally went back to my apartment. It felt wrong leaving my grandmother's house, like abandoning a sanctuary. But I needed clothes. I needed something normal. I needed something. The moment I opened the door, I froze. It looked like someone had been living there comfortably. Because they had. Takeout containers on the counter. His shoes kicked off in the middle of the living room. His clothes draped over the back of the couch. His razor, toothpaste, deodorant, all scattered across the bathroom sink. The bedroom was the worst. My bed, the bed I'd bought, was unmade and plastered with men's clothes. His clothes. He had been living here exactly as he wanted to, uninterrupted, rent-free, while I'd spent months listening to morphine pumps beep in the dark. Something in me snapped. I grabbed every piece of his stuff I could find and started boxing it. Clothes, shoes, video games, his stupid cologne I'd once loved on him. Everything. I lined the boxes by the front door. Then I called a locksmith. He came that night, changed the locks, handed me the new keys, wished me a quiet evening. It was the first quiet moment I'd had in weeks. When he left, I sent Landon one text, the final one I ever intended. Your things are boxed outside my apartment door. You have 1 day to pick them up. Your key no longer works. Do not contact me again. The response came instantly. A flood of messages. Are you kidding me? You can't do this. This is my home too. I'll call the police. I know my rights. I replied once. The lease is in my name only. You were a guest. I revoked that. Pick up your things. Then I blocked him. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The next morning, a police officer called from a non-emergency line. Ma'am, we received a call from a man stating you're withholding his personal property. I explained everything. The lease, the boxes, the photos I took of them outside the door, the fact he'd never once paid rent. So he's not a tenant? The officer asked. No, sir. And his belongings are accessible? Yes. Then you're within your rights, he said. You may want to consider a restraining order if the unwanted contact continues. My stomach tightened. Is that common? More than you'd think, he said quietly. That afternoon, Landon's mother showed up. She didn't even knock properly. She banged on the door, frantic and furious, like I'd kidnapped her son. When I opened it, she burst out with, "We need to talk." No thanks, I said, immediately stepping back. She shoved her foot forward to stop the door. My son is falling apart. He hasn't eaten. He hasn't slept. All because you won't even hear him out. Nothing runs in families as consistently as manipulation. There's nothing to hear out, I said. He told my dying grandmother to let go. He didn't mean it like that. How? I asked slowly. Does one mean that nicely? She hesitated, and that was all the answer I needed. He felt abandoned, she tried. You left him alone for months. My grandmother was dying, I said, and he visited 3 times. Well, he was busy. I almost laughed. He had time to tell her she was wasting my life. She turned red. You're throwing away everything over one emotional moment. What everything? I asked. I paid for the apartment. I paid the bills. I paid groceries. What exactly was he contributing besides stress? Her eyes narrowed to slits. You'll regret this, she snapped. When you're alone, with no one left. Better alone, I said, than with someone who sees dying people as obstacles. She stormed off. My phone buzzed moments later. A text from my uncle. Heads up, Landon's mom showed up here too. She's crying in the driveway. Want me to call the cops? I typed back. Only if she won't leave. 2 minutes later. She's leaving now. Just flipped me off. I stared at the message. This wasn't chaos anymore. This was a pattern. A coordinated one. And I realized, Right there in my grandmother's kitchen, surrounded by recipe cards and grief. The truth. They were not going to stop. Not until I drew a hard, legal line they could not cross. Not until I protected myself the same way I had protected my grandmother. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning of the escalation. The next morning, before the sun even crept through my grandmother's lace curtains, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. But something in me, instinct or dread, made me answer. Where are you? Landon. My stomach tightened. I'm at my grandmother's house, I said flatly, and I told you to stop contacting me. I've been waiting for you, he said, voice shaking like he was the victim here. For over an hour. Waiting where? Our coffee shop. That's what he called it. I called it the place with the good scones. I told him yesterday I wasn't coming. I told you to stop, I repeated. There is no meeting. There is no us. Stop. We need closure, he insisted. I swallowed a bitter laugh. Here's your closure. You're a man who told a dying woman to hurry up and die, and I want nothing more to do with you. He inhaled sharply. You're being dramatic. I hung up and blocked the number. 5 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I peered through the window, and there he was, standing on my grandmother's porch, in broad daylight, like he had every right in the world to be there. I didn't open the door. I didn't even breathe too loudly, but he knew I was inside. He knocked. Then he knocked harder. Then he started pounding. Lila, I know you're in there. Open this door. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped my phone. I called the only person I trusted to know what to do. Uncle Dave. She's here, I whispered. He won't leave. I'll be there in 5. Landon's voice rose outside. You owe me a conversation. You can't just block me. You can't just throw me away. His fist slammed into the doorframe like he was testing its strength. Footsteps thudded across the front porch. My uncle's truck screeched into the driveway. I watched through the side window as Uncle Dave climbed out, face carved into stone. He walked straight up to Landon, not fast, not angry, just absolutely certain. Leave, he said. She won't talk to me, Landon snapped. She's making this dramatic. She doesn't want to talk to you, my uncle said. That's the end of it. She should say that to my face. She did, Uncle Dave said, voice lowering, every time she didn't open the door. Landon's posture faltered. Panic flashed behind his eyes. He was losing control of the narrative, his favorite possession. This is insane, he muttered. You can't keep me from her. My uncle pulled out his phone and started dialing. Watch me. Landon bolted, down the steps, into his car, peeling out of the driveway so fast the tires shrieked against the asphalt. Uncle Dave didn't move until the car disappeared around the bend. Then he came to the door. You all right, kiddo? He asked quietly. I opened the door and nodded once, because trying to speak would have cracked me open. Time for a restraining order, he said. This isn't going to stop unless you make it stop. He was right, and I was done being afraid. The courthouse felt colder than the funeral home. I filed for a temporary restraining order that afternoon. The clerk handed me forms thick as a novella. Write everything, she said gently. Every message, every visit, every threat, every person he sent on his behalf. I did. I printed out screenshots. I attached photos. I pages long detailing each incident. The phone calls, the pounding on the door, the mother, the ex-girlfriend, the workplace harassment, the attempt to get into my building. Everything. The judge granted the temporary order immediately. Hearing, scheduled in 2 weeks. Protection, effective now. When I walked out with the papers in my hand, something loosened inside me. Not relief, not peace. Control. For the first time since the diagnosis, I felt the ground under my feet again. The next blow came 3 days later. I just logged into work, remote, because grief clung to me like a bruise, when my boss called. Hi, Lila, she said softly. How are you holding up? Getting through it, I said, 1 minute at a time. She hesitated. I got a strange call yesterday, she said, from a man claiming to be your boyfriend. My pulse spiked. Ex-boyfriend, I corrected. She sighed. He said he was concerned about you, that you were acting erratically since your grandmother passed, that someone needed to check on your mental state. My jaw dropped. I couldn't speak at first. I told HR, she continued, that it was inappropriate, that you've been nothing but professional, but I thought you should know. He's trying to sabotage my job, I whispered. He's trying to control the narrative, she corrected, but we're documenting everything on our end too. If he contacts us again, tell me immediately. I thanked her, hung up, sat in silence for a long time. He wasn't just crossing boundaries now. He was bulldozing them. It didn't stop there. A week later, the building manager of my apartment called. Hi, Ms. Carver, he said. I wanted to let you know your ex came by the lobby today. My stomach turned to ice. He said he forgot something inside your apartment and wanted to wait by the elevators. I told him I needed your permission. And? I asked. He argued, the manager said, until I mentioned the restraining order. He laughed softly. He left pretty fast. Thank you for calling, I said. No problem. Also, he tried claiming he still lived here. I checked your lease. He's never been on it. Correct, never has been. Well, the manager said, if he shows up again, we'll call the police. I hung up and pressed the heel of my hand against my forehead. This wasn't a breakup. This was an unraveling of someone who thought he owned me. A week before the hearing, something new happened. Chloe showed up at my workplace. Security called me. There's a friend of yours in the lobby? I went down. She stood there with her arms crossed, wearing sunglasses indoors like a discount celebrity. There's a restraining order, I said before she could open her mouth. It doesn't apply to me, she said. You're acting on his behalf, I said. That's third-party contact. That violates the order. Her jaw twitched. I just want to talk. No. Lila, if you don't leave, I said, I will call the police and report the violation myself. She left. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. Another unknown number. This is unreasonable, she snapped. He just wants to explain. Stop calling me, I said. Tell him to stop using you to contact me. It's illegal. You're blowing this out of proportion. I hung up and blocked that number too. I was building a collection. Finally, the day of the hearing arrived. The courtroom was small and windowless. Everything smelled like paper and stale air conditioning. I sat with my lawyer. Landon walked in with his mother, no lawyer. He looked thinner, or maybe just angrier. He refused to meet my eyes. The judge, an older woman with steel gray hair and glasses perched halfway down her nose, reviewed the stack of documentation my lawyer handed her. She read in silence, pages flipping, screenshots, printouts, police notes, workplace complaints, the whole mosaic of what my life had become in the last month. Then she looked up. Mr. Pierce, she said, this is extensive. Landon cleared his throat. Your Honor, I just wanted to talk to her. She wouldn't answer my calls. I have a right to closure. The judge raised a hand. He fell silent instantly. Did you, she asked slowly, or did you not tell Ms. Carver's dying grandmother that she should let go because Ms. Carver was wasting her life caring for her? The entire room held its breath. Landon's mother stiffened. Landon swallowed. It's being taken out of context. What context, the judge said, makes that acceptable? She was suffering, he stammered. You thought telling a dying woman she was a burden would help? The judge's voice could have frozen water. Landon floundered, mouth opening and closing. I didn't say burden. You implied it, she said. And you said other things. In this documentation, there are over 50 instances of unwanted contact. Contact after being blocked. Contact at her workplace. Contact through third parties. Attempts to access her residence. Pounding on her grandmother's door. Attempts to intimidate her. This is textbook harassment. He stared at the floor. The judge signed the order. 1 year. No contact. No third-party contact. You must stay 500 feet from Ms. Carver, her residence, her workplace, and her family. Violation will result in contempt of court and possible jail time. Do you understand? This is insane, he muttered. Do you understand? Beaten down, he whispered. Yes. His mother stood abruptly. This is wrong. She made one. The bailiff stepped forward. She sat back down. When it was over, I walked out into the hallway. My uncle was there waiting. He hugged me. Hard. Proud of you, kid, he said. Now he has consequences. For the first time in weeks, I felt something like my old lungs again, like they could finally expand without fear. That was last week. Since then, silence. No texts, no calls, no pounding on the door. Just quiet. But quiet, I was learning, wasn't the same as peace. Silence is strange after chaos. The first few days with no calls, no blocked numbers, no pounding on the door felt unreal, like someone had turned the volume down on the world, but I still hadn't convinced myself it would stay that way. I kept expecting my phone to light up with a new number, expecting to hear footsteps on the porch, expecting to feel the old tension in my shoulders I'd been carrying for months. But nothing came, just the creak of my grandmother's old house settling at night, the hum of her refrigerator, the soft tick of the mantel clock that had been there since before I was born. Grief, when it finally has space to breathe, expands. And with Landon's noise gone, my grandmother's absence filled every corner. I spent my days sorting through her things slowly, drawer by drawer, room by room. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to sit with her for as long as she would let me. In her bedroom closet, behind a stack of sweaters she never wore anymore, I found a plain brown box tied with twine. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to my parents. Letters dated from the year they died all the way through my adulthood. All written in my grandmother's small, neat handwriting. I sank onto the floor and opened one at random. She told them I got a perfect score on a spelling test, that I learned to ride a bike without training wheels, that I cried for 3 nights straight after reading Charlotte's Web, because life shouldn't take away things that are good. Another letter said she'd been saving every drawing I made. Another said she'd kept my baby blanket even after I was too old for it. Another said she wasn't sure if she was doing motherhood right, but she hoped they'd be proud anyway. Then I found the newest one, written only a few months ago. "I'm not afraid of dying," she wrote. "I'm afraid of leaving her alone. But she's strong. I raised her strong. She'll be okay without me." I pressed the paper to my face and sobbed so hard I thought my ribs might crack. Not the controlled grieving I'd been doing around family. Not the silent tears that slipped out when I changed her bed sheets or folded her cardigans. A full-body breakdown. The first time I had really allowed myself to cry since she died. Because until then, Landon had taken up all the air in the room, his drama, his harassment, his obsession with controlling the narrative, with controlling me. He had swallowed my grief, distorted it, overshadowed it with his own chaos. Reading her words felt like someone handing my sorrow back to me gently and saying, "This is yours. You're allowed to feel it now." Later that evening, Aunt Michelle came by, found me sitting at the dining table with a pile of letters around me like fallen leaves. She didn't speak at first, just sat down and picked up a letter. "You doing okay?" she asked eventually. I wiped my face. "Getting there." She nodded. "Your grandmother knew," she said softly. "Knew what?" "That Landon wasn't right for you. She told me more than once." The word surprised me. "She did? Why didn't she tell me?" Aunt Michelle smiled sadly. "She didn't want to influence your choices. Said you needed to figure it out yourself. That's how we grow," she always said. Of course she had. My grandmother never believed in forcing lessons. She let life teach them, and she trusted me to pay attention. And I finally had. The next morning, I received an alert from my apartment building's management system. Motion detected in the lobby. Then a message from the building manager. "Your ex showed up again. Tried to get into the lobby. Argued when asked to leave. We called the police. He left before they arrived." My chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with clarity. He was still testing boundaries. But now there were consequences. Real ones. He couldn't step foot near me without risking jail. He couldn't contact me. He couldn't recruit people to contact me. He couldn't show up at my home, my workplace, my grandmother's house. His world had shrunk. And mine, slowly, painfully, was expanding again. Some days were still hard. Some mornings, I'd wake up, reach instinctively for my phone to call my grandmother, and then remember. Those days hit like unexpected waves. But other days, I breathed easier. I cooked meals in her kitchen. I walked past her rose bushes. I read her letters, one by one. I sat in her favorite armchair at sunset and let the quiet settle around me like a blanket. I wasn't okay. Not yet. But I wasn't afraid anymore. And that felt like a kind of victory. Sometimes I think about the alternate future, the one I almost stepped into blindly. A future where I married a man who saw love as an inconvenience, who saw caretaking as betrayal, who saw death as competition, where I might have had children with someone who viewed empathy as weakness. And I am grateful, deep, soul-level grateful, that my grandmother saved me one last time. Not by living, by showing me, in her final days, who he really was. Her last gift was clarity. Her last lesson was boundaries. And now I choose to honor her by living with both. Taking it day by day, going through her things, grieving, healing, rebuilding a life without someone who wore a suit to a funeral he wasn't invited to and showed up in heels and a cocktail dress, metaphorically and emotionally, when compassion was required. She would have found that fitting. In a strange way, so do I.